Hi guys and welcome back to Getting Into TV. I'm Tom, your host, and this is your home to finding out everything there is to know about working in TV, be that scripted or unscripted TV. It has been a little bit of a break since my last episode, and I apologise for that. I just started back on my production and got a bit busy and time just ran away with me. But don't worry, because I'm back every Thursday from now on, starting with today's episode where I'm chatting to Michael van Kesteren all about designing props for TV, how he started, how you can get into it. And he also has some great stories to share about working in the art department and creating things such as the 14th Doctor's Sonic. So without further ado, here's my episode. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for chatting to me today. I'm really excited to kind of just, I suppose, talk to you about art department because I mean, on my podcast, I've done a lot of stuff with production management and assistant directing, and I recently did one with an editor as well. But I've never done something arty and creative in this sense of the word. And I'm really excited to just kind of like talk to you about what you do and just learn about your, I suppose, how you go about creating these things, the props that we all see and end up loving on our TV screens. So I suppose the best place to start is, can you just give me a brief rundown about what are the key things that you do?
In this case, prop art director is the person in charge of designing and overseeing the building of props that are character or story specific that cannot be rented or bought and have to be specifically designed for the purpose of the story, such as lightsabers, sonic screwdrivers, magic wands, what you name it, and then oversee the fabrication and delivery of said props or
Pretty cool
pieces of
job.
set dressing every now and again.
Pretty cool job. Very excited.
It's not bad. I'm an extremely fortunate person to have ended up where I am, considering how I got here. It's a really uh, almost privileged part of the art department. I get to do really cool small stuff, and it's almost like they don't trust me that has anything that has walls, which is great. I don't have to stress about big sets or anything. It's good fun, and all the stuff I do gets turned into toys, which is great.
That's true. I mean, I'm a 27-year-old kid and I absolutely love this thing. So it's a pretty cool job.
I actually just bought two more of those.
You shouldn't have to
So I
buy
bought
them.
two
You should
more of
just be
those to give
given
away to
them.
kids every now and again. Yeah, I know. I need to make a t-shirt that says I buy my own merch.
I love that. I love that. Talk to me about your journey into becoming a prop art director, because that's what you're currently doing. And what inspired you to, I suppose, get into the art department?
It was kind of a natural progression of how I decided to choose my career path in this industry because I didn't start in an artistic background. I
Mhm.
didn't do an art college. I didn't go to a theatre college, any of that. I was an engineer. I was doing aircraft engineering, and after I did aircraft engineering, and I then went into mechanical engineering, and this was 21 years ago now. So big industrial stuff and also robotics as well. One of the companies I worked for specialized in robotic grippers for the food packaging industry. And I distinctly remember one day standing in a potato packing plant in Peterborough or near Peterborough. And I could see that the robot we were installing there to pick up bags of potatoes and put them into containers, um, nobody cared. Nobody cared what we were doing. Nobody cared what they were doing. They're just mindlessly bagging, picking up stuff and putting it in boxes and crates and whatnot. And it dawned on me that at that point, I couldn't, at 10 years from that point, look back at my life and be proud of what I was doing because nobody cares how a bag of potatoes ends up in the supermarket. I was still in that industry for a little while, but maybe for about 6 months or so when I went to South Africa because my girlfriend at the time started knocking on doors in Cape Town where the
Oh,
where the industry is out there. I'd say about 6 months or so out there. I got lucky because 10,000 BC, the Roland Emmerich movie, had rolled into town and had swallowed up all the remaining crew, all the crew that was there.
yeah.
So there was a workshop in Cape Town called CFX Productions, who took me in because they needed people to carry on with their other stuff because they did commercials and whatnot. So I ended up starting out working, making a 5 meter long animatronic octopus tentacle.
As you do.
Yeah, it was for a sherry commercial. It was a harsh start into the industry because I had no idea what I was doing. I knew more or less how these things worked, and then basically winged it. I just took my engineering skills and applied it to this animatronic, and it seemed to pan out. So basically, I transferred my engineering background and put it into making these mechanical props. as things went on, I got into more design, and the company I worked for had an ambition to do more previs and more design as well, some more in-house stuff. So I then transferred my design skills from designing CAD drawings for robotic grippers and all that stuff, and just transferring it into sets and whatnot. I also went out onto 10,000 BC, and I met other people. Um, and you get talking one-on, and then they get to know you. So I went from that onto a movie called Doomsday by Neil Marshall, and I was working in the art department there. Started out as a model maker, then doing small designs. So I started doing a little bit more design, a little bit more model building, so a bit of everything. So while I was out there, did a whole range of stuff, and it was very much a crash course into the industry.
The best way
So
sometimes is kind of have that crash course kind of entry into what you're doing and just kind of like be, I suppose, thrown into the deep end, learn it all.
Oh yeah, it was very much into the deep end. I learned how to work with the guys in the art department, also how to work with guys on set, because you do all of that there because it's a small community. And how this company worked is that if you work on a prop, if you design it and you build it, you go with it onto set. In 2009, I worked on a show called Outcasts in the art department, actually doing concept stuff, but also then more proper drawings and stuff. So it's just a bit of a all-rounder in the art department. That production designer was Ed Thomas, who's from the UK. He'd just come off of several years of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So he went to South Africa to do Outcasts, and then he went back. After a few more years of doing a mixture of design and building and props and animatronics and puppets and creatures and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. And around at the time, Ed got in touch with me and said, so I've got this job coming up because he remembered me from Outcasts. So I said, I've got a job for you if you're willing to come to the UK. And I looked at the timing, and it was exactly at the time when I was going to be in the Netherlands for my for Christmas. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And that was years ago now. Since then, I've been doing more art department stuff now. So I did more concept art and prop design because that's where I sort of found my niche is in prop design.
Mm.
So for Da Vinci's Demons, I got to design all of the Da Vinci inventions, such as a glider, this mechanical bird. So a whole lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of my questions from later on, but I just want to ask you now, actually, how do you how do you come up with something like that? Where do you begin? When someone says to you, I want you to go and make a flying thing for the Da Vinci demons, where do you begin? 'Cause my brain doesn't think like that. Like, how did you come up with designing that?
So in the case of like the glider, actually with anything really, is what you do is you read the script and you read the story, what's required of that item in the story. Does it have a thing that pops out? Does it need to shoot flames or does it need to light up? Any of that sort of stuff. You look at how it's described in the script, and if there's something that you can equate it to in our world. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's like a gun or
Yeah.
whatever. You start with references. You look up as many references as you can find, and you go over those references with the production design and stuff. So what do you think about this? And we add a bit of that, and then there's a back and forth between yourself and the production designer or set decorator, depending on who's in charge of that. And you then go off and you start with a couple of sketches, couple of designs, like 4 or 5 designs. I found that if you do more than that, so many designs at once, it tends to get not confusing, but it's a bit of an information overload because quite often production designers or their time is fairly limited and they've got a lot of other stuff to think about. So when you overload them with stuff, it's like I don't know. So you narrow it down to a few cool ones. And then you go show them. And then you sort of choose your way from there. It's like, oh, that one's quite cool, but I like what's on that one. So can we combine those? And eventually you just, go back and forth until you come to something that works. And from there, you then work out the design to create the prop. And you break it down into its constituent parts and then how to manufacture it. After that, I went on and did a year in Isle of Dogs, where I was 3D printing for a year in a small cabin by myself, just 4 3D printers to keep me company.
What were you 3D printing on that?
On Isle of Dogs, I was 3D printing things like small components that were too complex or too delicate to mold and cast, or clear parts, or small detail components like trolley wheels and stuff, things that needed to be mechanically precise but small. It was interesting because I started that job and the model makers came up to me and go, are you here to steal our jobs? Because they were very, very leery of me being there for 3D printing. And I'm like, no, 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 honestly, I'm not. Trust me, it's not that. It's not at all. And after about 2 weeks or so, they realized that they didn't have to do the really tedious stuff. So when they found out that they didn't have to make 50 little pipe fittings for a railing,
Yeah.
they come in and say, Matt, I've got this drawing here. Could you make these little things here, please? I said, yeah, sure, no worries. Because what it allowed them to do is it allowed them to then focus their skills and attention on all the areas that required their expertise.
It must be a pretty cool feeling when you see something in real life that you've just thought of and drawn in drawn to paper, and then to see it in real life must be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It sometimes depends on the item. I found when I was doing commercials that you get very sick of it very quickly, but you don't have time to get to attach to it because it's gone and done. With TV shows and movies, you go, oh, see, that's quite cool. It's always fun to see it realized, especially when you've got the time and budget behind it. Because sometimes you can draw something that's a little bit too ambitious, so you've got to keep that sort of thing in mind that it needs to be achievable. But yeah, it's always great, nice to
What's,
see something you built or
what's your
designed.
favorite thing that you've I suppose drawn and created that's then come to life? What are you most proud of that you've done designed over your career so far?
The 14th Doctor Sonic.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
This one.
that's the one.
I love this. It's a great design.
I get that a lot, by the way. So people ask me, so what have you, what do you do? So I work in film and TV. I design stuff. I said, oh right. Anything I've seen? I don't know. Well, then I'll start naming the stuff, and more often than not, go, sorry, haven't seen it. Doctor Who's great because it's like more than 7 people have seen it.
Celebrate your work, I suppose.
Yeah, celebrate or massively slate it. It's fans are a funny thing.
What was that like then? Why is that particularly your favorite? Is it because people see it, or was it just a fun thing to, I suppose, create? And what was it like to create
Well,
something so, I suppose, iconic in a way?
I was working on his Dark Materials eventually. I did 3 seasons of that, having done the Alethiometer and whatnot.
Hmm.
And I transitioned from his Dark Materials, which is at Bad Wolf, onto Doctor Who. Joel Collins was very persuasive in keeping me on board. I was being offered a Star Wars show, so I was kept on to do Doctor Who because Star Wars was 90 miles away and Doctor Who was 9 miles away. And I've got a
Nice.
family. I want to stay home for my family. So I started doing designs then, knowing that we're doing a 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. So I started watching all of Doctor Who. I've seen all of Doctor Who now, even the really sticky first Doctor stuff.
There's some good stuff in there,
And
but definitely some sticky.
there is some really horrible stuff as well. I mean, have you sat through the Web Planet? Anyway, so I knew that there was going to be a fair amount of pressure on creating something that would encapsulate 60 years of Doctor Who. So I
Hmm.
started doing sketches and designs and keeping like the classic era in mind as well. In total, I did for that Sonic, about 70 different sketches and silhouettes and renders, and there's a whole lot of stuff. Ultimately, we chose a silhouette out of this massive board of silhouettes. We had this whole swathe of designs, and we narrowed it down to about
Hmm.
20, 30. And then from those, we worked out about 15. And I did some designs, some renders of those, some rough renders. When we chose the one we went with, I then started refining the elements that went into it. We had a lineup of about 14, 15 Sonics. And Russell's brief was, it needs to be something that every kid wants for Christmas.
Yeah.
So like, huh, I've got one of those at home. So I printed out an A3 render of the image of those Sonics and took it home and showed my 4-year-old. And which one do you like, Bubba? He went, I like that one. And that was the one we were gravitating towards. So okay, cool. We'll do that one then. So when you see that image, it is different to the Sonic that we know now because there's a few changes to it because as from that point it evolved further. But what I did is I put his name in Gallifreyan on the button, which is on
Really?
the toy. Yeah,
Oh,
and
so that little,
that's my son's name.
I like that. I like that you can do that in your role, that you get to kind of like add in them little secrets that
A little bit of,
no one else really knows.
yeah. He sort of represents the new, the future generation of Doctor Who. And so with that, I had to now had this I had now the silhouette, so I had to rationale what bit goes where and how to color certain things because a certain color on the prop will represent a certain era, a certain shape will represent a certain era. I had certain ideas for certain pieces as well.
Mm.
Like if you look at the tip of it head on, you notice there's a concentric ring
Yeah.
which is meant to hark back to the ring and the bullet head on the third and fourth Doctor's Sonic. So
Ah,
I went 60 years back with references on that one.
I love that. I love that this is it feels like a fan's dream Sonic. It's a really nice design. And I think you've done a really, really great job with it. I think it really does
Thank
your work was
thank
amazing.
you. But with that one, it was going swimmingly until someone went, I think it may have been Russell, he said, but 11 Sonic had the prongs that come out. Can we do something like that as well? So that's where I had to try and engineer
And
the
incorporate that.
solution to have those prongs come out. And then in the script, it was described how it creates this force field. So I then suggested that when those petals opened, they're petals officially, when those petals opened, there's little lights in there. Those like the extra emitters that would then project these force fields. So that's how the lights in there where
I,
those came from. But and then engineering that thing was an interesting challenge to get it all to work and to move. There's little teeny bearings in there which are like 80 pounds each, and they're 3 millimeters diameter with a 1 millimeter hole in the middle, and they're so tiny. But that's just to make it move in and out as smoothly as
well,
possible. And when you hold the prop and you slide it open and slide it closed, it sounds like a very expensive watch.
nice. Nice. I think it's a really nice story. Thank you for sharing that. Just talking about what you do now as a prop art director, what's a typical day like for you in the art department as a prop art director on shows like Doctor Who or say His Dark Materials? What's a typical day like for you for some just for someone that maybe wants to get into what you do?
Well, for me, because of my position, I am usually in charge of the hero props. Um, though I will oversee some of the junior members because I can't do everything myself. Doctor Who is a massively prop heavy show. So what I'll do is I'll do the things like the sonic screwdriver and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the junior level guys, they will take care of things like little iPad surrounds and touch panels and control panels. Every now and again, I'll farm out a slightly more significant prop and hand it to one of the guys because you can't just give them the same stupid thing to do every single time because you get sick of another iPad or another control panel. So every now and again, you need to make sure that everyone has a chance to do something interesting. There are days where I will be coming up with designs, ideas for props that are described in the script. I'll have to, break down the script, see what's needed. My personal breakdowns aren't quite as thorough as other people's because I look for stuff that is hero. Whereas the other guys, they'll look for literally everything. It's like, oh, he presses a button there, or he goes through a door there. And so then there has to be cross-checked with the schedule when they're up and required. So with luck, we have at least 2 weeks to build things. If it's a small device or a small thing, that's just a little shiny box with a button on it. We can do that in a few days. If it's a more involved hero, for instance, the Sonic, the 14th Doctor Sonic. Technically, I started in my Christmas break. That was effectively 4 months of design
Wow.
and approvals and meetings and manufacturing before we got it on set. We started proper design in January, and it was on screen in May.
Wow.
That's 5 months to design, approve, engineer, and then assemble because they also have to be built and then it gets to be finished and painted and put onto set. So depending on the prop, it can take a short amount of time or a long amount of time. And also depending on whether or not there's a change in the script, because every now and again, you've got your schedule, you've got your lineup of this, that, and the other. And then this happened this season. The thing that's supposed to be in the next block and the next episode has been written into this episode, and it's up next Friday. Every now and again, you get a bit of a exhilarating week,
We
to
all
put it
need that.
mildly.
We all need that.
So after we've discussed the design, the prop obviously needs to be built. So what I would then do is I'll go take the design and talk to head of fabrication, in this case, the excellent Barry Jones, the legend himself, who's one of the finest fabrication foremen in the country. And he will go over the design and decide, well, we can 3D print that or we'll laser cut that. And once we've then I'll go back to the drawing board and start fleshing out the design. I'll start breaking it down into components where we'll decide which piece will be 3D printed, which piece will be laser cut, which pieces shall be machined, where do the batteries for the lights go, and how do we put the lights in? Because all of these things are important to make it build as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. Personally, I take the route, being an engineer, that I front load the process with as many designs and as many renders and as many explanations as possible, because it saves the fabrication team time when they build it. And again, like I said earlier, with the 3D printing of pieces for the model makers on Isle of Dogs, the more I can help them, the more they can put their time and effort into making the prop as beautiful and as finished as possible. And that will then allow us to then possibly give it another little extra pass. We go, okay, well, that's really nice. Why don't we also add this little bit at the end? After those designs have been approved by a supervising art director and production designer, they then officially get distributed, and I will then oversee the fabrication of the parts and of the item, and then make sure it's completed on time, and then hand it over correctly to the standby props guys, who will then take care of it from that point on. That step is crucially important as well, because while I may have designed it and I know how it works and where the batteries go and where the switches are and how the screen tablet slides into it and how to recharge it, if you just hand them the thing, they'll not know what to do with it, and it frustrates them on the day, because if something goes wrong, they don't quite know how to be able to fix it quickly on time, or it'll be fixed in such a way that it renders it inoperable because they don't have the full information. So it's very important that when I hand things over, is I personally take the item and take it to them and explain them, like, this is where the batteries are, this is where the switch is, this, that, and the other.
Like, your job's not just drawing, it is, you got to explain, there's got to be a reason behind everything, because it does help people on the set when they're
Yeah.
actually using it.
Yeah, and it's massively appreciated when you do explain these things to these guys, because when there's God knows how much crew staring at you to get something to work, and they're going, where does this, something's fallen off, it doesn't work. It just makes their day incredibly stressful, and it just breeds resentment. We're all working on the same show. It all helps to get the best you can get on screen.
And that's exactly what everyone wants, isn't it? And you mentioned in there a few job titles. Would you be able to just talk to me a bit about what the team looks like? And I asked this, basically, my boyfriend did work experience and he'd always wanted to work in the arts department. And he knew what he thought he knew what he wanted to do. And then he did the work experience and he was like eyes opened to a whole world of new roles and what was on offer. It wasn't just the one thing that he thought that there was. So yeah, could you just tell me a bit about what's the team like within the arts department? What's on offer for people that might want to get into what you're doing?
So the art department is made up of, at the top, at the boss, is the production design, and he will work closely with the set decorator. Those two, they are very close, because the production designer has the grand idea for the thing, for the sets, for the look of the show, and the set decorator has to make sure that that's achieved with the finishings and furnishings and all that sort of stuff. So effectively, when you look at if you walk into the Doctor Who art department, you'll see, when you walk through the doors, on the right-hand side of the room is art department, the left-hand side of the room is set decoration. It is two massive teams. This is an exceptionally large show compared to its predecessor. So on the art department side, you will have production design, supervising art director. Supervising art directors, they keep an eye on the budget, they keep an eye on the schedule. They are a liaison between producers, production designers, and us, and they keep an eye on scripts. They keep an eye on if everyone's up to date with their tasks. They will make sure that everyone is allocated something to do. They basically run the art department. Then below them we have the art directors or senior art directors and art directors. Senior art directors they tend to get the bigger, more important sets. So like a senior art director designed the TARDIS, for instance, or on his Dark Materials, a senior art director designed the Magisterium. Below them there will be art directors that will assist them. So what they'll do is they'll do the grand outline of the set that will be discussed with the production designer, where they will use references and concept art from the concept art guys. In this case, it's painting prep. With all that, they will then come up with a design that will fit the budget, the stage, and then the needs of lighting and camera. Because it's all good and well building a set, but if you can't light it or film in it, it's no point building it. So yeah, the senior art directors get those, and they will have one or two art directors that will assist them in drawing. So the senior art director will say, okay, he's gonna draw the outline of it, and then partition that off, and then hand that to other art directors, who will then help flesh those out. Then there's also draftspersons, assistant draftspersons, who will then also, it's just spreading the load of work. Now, each art director usually gets control of a set. So when it's big set, it's art director, senior art director, multiple art directors. And then once that's done, they then spread out and do their own smaller sets. My good friend John Horsham, he did the Space Baby Space Station. So he was in charge of that for that block. And then we had another art director who was in charge of another set. So an art director is in charge of a set, and they will then have junior draftspersons or draftsperson, junior draftsperson who will then assist them in creating the smaller details. In my case, what I do is, because I focus on the props, the way I describe what I do is things that can't be bought or rented, but are character or story specific, they come to me. It's like, oh, we need a button on that wall. All right, cool. No, whack something out. Then we work together with set dressing. And set dressing, you'll have the set dresser, and then you'll have his own team of set dressers who will then be in charge of different sets, and there'll be buyers who will then go out and source the stuff, research and source the bits that we need. And that could be anything from like a doorbell or a telephone to carpets to wallpaper. So those guys will put the finishing touches on the set, because we will design it on the art department side. They will furnish and populate it. And that's anything from like the smallest little button to bowls, glasses, lights. Because when the construction crew builds the set, they just build the flats and the shape of it.
Yeah.
And the scenic artists will come in, they will do the painting and all the plastering and whatnot. And then it's like moving into an empty house. So that's when set dressing comes in, and they decorate the place. And so we work with them with, okay, so we will need to we have a device that needs to fit into that place. Can you guys get us these sort of buttons or these sort of cables? And then we can then work together to build the thing as we need it. Because sometimes we're building a Victorian mansion, sometimes we're building a submarine, sometimes it's a cave, and other times it's a space station. So every time everything is different. And then there's also the graphics department, who have now moved out because the art department has grown so big. They're now in a container outside. And what the graphics department does, we also work with those guys quite closely, because every now and again we will have a device that has a screen in it or has a graphic on it, and they will take care of that. So they will create little motion graphics that go on little phones that are embedded in devices like Pip-Boys. They also do like any sort of paperwork that's got print on it, be it handwritten or be it printed. They'll do newspapers, they'll do bus shelter signs, they'll do hand-scrawled paintings on a wall, all that sort of stuff. That's the graphics department, who are very much underrated.
Yeah, I went to uni with her. I went to uni and we weren't in the same course, separate courses, but Sophie Cowry.
Oh yeah,
Who
Sophie.
did,
Yeah,
yeah, who
I saw
did
her today.
who
Yeah.
did that amazing thing in David's last one. The puppet kind of stand where not the master, where the
Yes.
maker came out of. Brilliant,
The
absolutely
toy maker.
brilliant design. Yeah, the brilliant
Yeah.
design.
Yeah. So those guys, they do really hard. They that I think some of the first season almost killed them, but yeah, no, they do hard work, but they do a lot of really cool stuff, and they
Yeah.
also get to sneak the odd Easter egg in as well, which is great. And the cool thing is, whenever you see a bunch of photos on a wall, it's you members or their family.
That's yeah, I know that Sophie is on the fridge, isn't she? Which I think is pretty cool. I love how
Yeah,
add these
yeah.
Easter eggs in, and it seems to me that there's a variation or a wide variety of jobs on offer within the art department. What advice would
Oh
you be
yeah.
able to give to people aspiring to work within the art department? That maybe what skills should they be looking to kind of gain? What can they do to be to be you essentially?
We get a lot of guys in via Screen Alliance Wales. And they get placements, and they're in it. They'll come in, they'll see what's going on. Once they come in, they get them. I just like you're saying earlier, is like once they're in, they can then see they've got a better understanding of what happens because it's a very nebulous sort of thing. You say, "Oh, the art department did this." It's like, yeah, but the art department is a really big thing. We don't just it's not just this nebulous box we put an idea in on one side
Yeah,
and the prop pops out the other side. There's a lot of work that goes in there. There's research, there's model building, there's drawings, there's concepts, there's back and forth discussing designs. There's a lot that happens in that room. And some people find out, oh, okay, I had this idea of what it is. Um, but now that I'm here, I can see I really like the idea of doing a set, or I really like the idea of doing a prop, or graphics looks amazing. That's really up my street. You have, if you've got a background in illustration, you didn't really know that there's a whole department that does that.
Mm.
So I would say that if at all possible, try and find a placement with us or with a show, and then first see what goes on, talk to people in that department. That's what I encourage every person that comes into a placement, because them sitting next to me is great, and they say they do learn a lot, but I encourage them to go talk to that person over there, or go see what those guys are doing, or let's go down to the workshop and see what they're doing over there. So give them as wide a view of what's going on,
yeah,
so they can speak to other people and see what their experiences are. I would definitely recommend that you're up to date with CAD drawing. You don't have to be super stellar at it because it's a baptism of fire. You'll get those skills fairly quickly as long as you don't keep to yourself that you're needing a bit of help every now and again. Everyone needs help. I Google stuff all the time as well. I find that's quite often with younger crew, they feel that they can't speak up about things that they don't know because they might feel a bit insecure about their position in the show. Like, oh, if they don't know I can't do this, if they know I can't do this, they might not ask me back next season. No, just ask. Just
yeah,
be open about it. It's like, right, I'd like to do this, not quite sure how. Can you give me a heads up on how that works? More often than not, people quite happily say, okay, you just do this, and then off you go. It's 5 minutes of sharing information. So don't be afraid to ask questions. But yeah, a basic understanding of CAD drawing, 3D modeling helps. Bit of Photoshop doesn't go amiss. So your basic 2D, 3D skills,
No, I
and
think
then
what you
from
said there
there,
is really, really, really important. I mean, it's something that I say all the time on this podcast. I originally started when I started working in telly. I started as an AD on things like Casualty and that. And in my early days, I just didn't want to ask questions, didn't want to do it at all because it just felt like you say, I was scared that I would show my insecurities and that I wouldn't be hired again. But now, years later, I'm always asking questions, and it's so important. Like this is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I love just learning from people and love just knowing what people do. I'm just so curious. And I think being curious is the best thing about is one of the best things you can be in this industry.
yeah, and people, and especially in our art department, we have a very close-knit family art department. It's because most of us have been working together for the last 6 years,
Yeah.
through His Dark Materials and 2.5 seasons of Doctor Who. You do have to pick your moment, of course. So
Yeah.
don't when someone's looking extremely extremely stressed and is focusing on something, don't go, "Hey, excuse me, Dave, can you just..." No, that's just give them a moment. Then never when they see them going for a cup of tea, go have a cup of tea too, and then go, "Hey, by the way, how do you..." So yeah, no, yeah, it's just don't be afraid to ask questions, and also make sure you set boundaries for yourself very early. Because
Yeah.
I've also seen a lot of young crew members feel they need to prove themselves.
Mm.
And more often than you're already being hired because your talent has been recognized, but there's no need for you to burn yourself out to try and prove your worth.
It's so easily done because it's such long days as well in this industry, and it can be so crazy. And
Oh yeah,
your job kind of becomes your life in a way. It's so easily done. But
yeah.
I think what you say there is it's spot on. Thank you so much um, for sharing your expertise. Really,
No,
I
you're
really
most
really
welcome.
appreciate it. I got one more question for you, and this is I say this in every episode because
Go ahead.
it's true. It's the question that stumps everyone, and it really does shock me that this stumps everyone. Just what have you been watching on TV recently?
The last thing was Fallout and Bad Batch. I'm looking
Nice.
forward to Acolyte, which I almost worked on. That's the thing I turned down in Reading. That's another thing. Because so I have seen how this industry can swallow up people's lives, which is what I'm saying, take care of yourself. Also take care of your family and your friends around you, because you can very easily end up consumed by this job.
Yeah.
It's a great job, don't get me wrong. You do really cool stuff, doing really cool things in really cool places, but it can end up missing 10, 15 years of your children's lives.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with other people. But I also know from my own history, my dad's a pilot. He was away from home a lot, and that really had an effect on my family. Because
Yeah.
my mum was Irish, and we moved to the Netherlands when I was 8 years old, and she didn't speak a word of Dutch, and she had trouble learning the language. She's a bit of a stubborn old bird. So when my dad was away on like a 3-day night stop somewhere, it just put a lot of strain on. So I saw what that effect had on families, on my own
Yeah.
family. And I know what this industry has a very similar effect on families. I know people who missed their kids growing up because they were working away or working in another country for 6, 7 months at a time. And I turned down jobs in Hungary. I was offered Halo. I was offered Acolyte. When I was offered Halo, he was two. And I said to them, "Look, I'm really, really flat. I really appreciate the job offer you've given me, but at this point in time, I don't want to work away from home because I want to be with my family." And I did the same with Acolyte. I knew that's 90 miles away, and Doctor Who was nine. I can see it from my house. If I lean out this window right now, I can see the lights on the tower that are the incinerator, which is next door to Badwell Studios. Um, So I can be home every night to read stories to my son. I felt my having had that history from my dad being a pilot, and knowing how it can affect family, how this industry affects family and friendships as well, I prioritized my own family. So I declined those jobs far away and stuck with Doctor Who because it was closer, and I ended up enjoying them.
I think that's
And
a
I
really nice
felt
way
that
of
family is more important.
ending the podcast family, just because as good as TV is, it is just TV, and you just kind of you look back on
Yes.
things, and you won't look back on the jobs that you didn't take. You'll look back on the time you missed. But yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for chatting to me. I feel like I've learned so much about the art department. I'm going to go and tell my boyfriend everything that you've just told me. I'm going to show him this episode, like listen to this, and then go and find a job. But it's been a real
Yeah.
interest just like learning about the art department and in the process and just getting to talk to you about what you do.
You're most welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a really good time.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
It's not often that I get to talk.
Well, I'm glad that I gave you the opportunity. I thank you so much. Thanks so much for watching and listening to this week's episode. It was so interesting getting to hear Michael talk about not only my favourite show, but how he designs the props for my favourite show. Don't forget, if you want to catch up on any episode of Getting Into TV, you can just go and check out over on the YouTube or Spotify. Just search Getting Into TV and you'll find it. But I'll be back next week with another episode of Getting Into TV. To find out what that is, you need to go and follow my Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram, where I'll be revealing that very, very soon. But I've got some good episodes coming up covering covering loads of things within the world of Doctor Who and other shows as well. But thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.